What is happening, everybody? We are back. Corey Hughes' Bloody History. Today we're going to... we've been doing a lot of Jack Ruby and people surrounding Jack Ruby. We did Eva Grant, and we did Breck Wall, and we did Joe Peterson. And then, in a roundabout kind of way connected to these people, we did Bernard Weissman's Warren Commission testimony. So, we're going to get back to the theme of Jack Ruby here shortly. We have years of Jack Ruby material. If I did nothing but Jack Ruby every fucking day for an hour a day, it would take me like 5 fucking years to get through all the goddamn Jack Ruby stuff. So it's not going to happen anytime soon. So we're going to stretch Jack Ruby out, for a long time. And so I don't really... So when I do series like that, like I'm up to like part 12 in fucking Jack Ruby, right? And fortunately, there's been nothing that really stands out except for the very first episode. There was some good stuff in that one. And the rest of it is just coming to see some people connected to Ruby in the old days, people who made comments about Ruby but turned out they didn't really know him. Stuff like that. So, sorry about that. And so I don't really like the way that I have the numbering system, and I don't really put a lot of detailed notes in the show notes at all. And so I'm kind of thinking of how I can come up with a new numbering system and a better way of documenting what's on each episode. But in order to do that, to go back in time and redo that for a lot of the longer series, actually like Kerry Thornley, David Ferry, Jack Ruby, George de Mohrenschildt, a couple of those I could go back and do that for. But I'm looking at ways to do that because a new person coming into the podcast would be a little lost seeing 12 parts of 12 hours basically, or 11 to 12 hours of Jack Ruby. Could be a little intimidating. So if you have any ideas, shoot me over a message, Corey@CoreyHughes.org. But we're going to get off the subject of Jack Ruby today. Well, we're never really off the subject because every subject that you talk about in Kennedy is connected to every other subject. So, but we're going to examine what's called Decker Exhibit 5323, and really it's a collection of witness statements, some statement from Decker himself. We'll get some clarification on Decker's activities, well, according to him, which... Here's the deal. Decker ends up at Parkland Hospital at the same time that Jack Valente arrives on the Secret Service car. And what's inside the Secret Service car? Well, the rifle that Jack Valente used to shoot the president. By my calculations, an Enfield 303, which shot bullets that had a pointed tip, like the original Magic Bullet before it was swapped out by the FBI. Sometime between the assassination and, God, what month was it? I don't remember what month it was. I'll just say late 1964. Sometime in that time period, the FBI swapped the pointed tip 303 bullet, which was identified as a pointed tip 303 bullet by Josiah Thompson in his book 6 Seconds in Dallas, to give appropriate credit. And for some reason, the incident involving the gentleman at Parkland Hospital. Oh my God, I'm starting to get old. The name, I've said their names a million times, and they're on the tip of my tongue. The orderly, the two guys who found the magic bullet, right? So when Josiah Thompson wrote his book 6 Seconds in Dallas, he goes into extreme detail on how the bullet they found had a pointed tip. And see, then the bullet was turned over to Richard Johnson, who then of the Secret Service, who then turned it over to his superior, who then it eventually gets turned over to the FBI. And by 1964, the photographs of the magic bullet are taken. So, but I don't remember what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm off topic big time. But we're going to get back to this Decker Exhibit 5323, which I said was a collection of statements. Got a statement from Decker himself. And we'll be on this for a couple days. This will probably eventually lead us to... I want to go through a whole lot of statements in regards to, the real nuts and bolts of Dealey Plaza, right? Because I do a lot of stuff that's on the outskirts of the assassination, and I want to kind of get back to some of the core stuff. So, this has a label on it. Oswald Lee Harvey, white male, 24. Murder, 11/22/63 of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, white male, 46, President of the United States. Assault to murder Governor John B. Connally. Couple more stickers signed off on by Bill Decker. Decker exhibit number 5323 at the bottom of every page. First page here is the Sheriff's Department. Looks like an affidavit. What kind of arrest affidavit? Victim of murder. Kennedy, John Fitzgerald, has a bunch of miscellaneous information, Lee Harvey Oswald, Howe attack, 6.25 Italian rifle. It's not accurate, but it's close enough. No big deal there. The complainant, President of the United States of American. That's what it actually says. It says the President of the United States of American. This is a goddamn cop who's supposed to be educated in America, but it says United States of American. Was riding in a motorcade with his wife Jacqueline and John B. Connally, governor of the state of Texas, and Mrs. Connally, at approximately, it says 12:33 p.m., but that's false. It was actually 12:30 p.m., almost exactly. 11/22/63, 3 shots were heard, and President looks like he sloped to the seat of the vehicle in which he was riding. Investigation reveals the shots came from the Texas School Book Depository building located at the corner of Elm Street and Houston Streets, and from the next to the top floor of windows, the last window on the east end of the building. Not signed. Dated November 22nd, 1963. Arresting officer is not indicated on here. This looks like a document that was made up after the fact, because this is not any kind of fucking real... this would never be accepted in a goddamn court of law as an arrest affidavit. So this has to have been something that was... because it's missing so much information. It doesn't have almost anything on here. This had to have been done after the fact. Like, really after the fact. And I don't mean just, like, after the assassination, obviously. All right. Complainant, the governor of the United States, was riding in a motorcade with John Kennedy, President of the United States, and their wives. 3 shots rang out coming from the Texas School Book Depository building, located at the corner of Elm and Houston Streets. All right. This appears to be the statement from Bill Decker. On November 22nd, 1963, at approximately 11:15 a.m., I was picked up at my office by Chief of Police Jesse Curry in his automobile, and we proceeded to Love Field to await the arrival of President John F. Kennedy. After arriving at Love Field, Chief Curry and I were joined by Mr. Forrest Sorrell, special agent in charge of the Dallas office of the U.S. Secret Service, and Mr. Winston G. Lawson, a special agent of the U.S. Secret Service, White House detail. After the president's arrival, the motorcade was formed, with the motorcycle escort first in the line, followed directly by Chief Curry's automobile, in which Chief Curry was driving. Mr. Lawson was in the right front seat. Mr. Forrest Sorrell's in the right rear seat. And I was seated in the rear left-hand side of the car. The presidential automobile was directly behind us as we escorted the motorcade on its route through Dallas. There had been no incidents during the entire route of the motorcade, and we arrived at Elm Street at approximately 12:31 p.m. Mr. Lawson had just looked at his watch, stating it was 12:31. It's a little fast there, Mr. Lawson, and remarking that we would be approximately 5 minutes late in arriving at Market Hall. As the motorcade was proceeding down Elm Street, I distinctly remember hearing 2 shots. As I heard the first retort, I looked back over my shoulder and saw what appeared to be a spray of water coming out of the rear seat of the president's car. At this same moment, Mr. Lawson said, "Let's get out of here and get to the nearest hospital." When I heard the shots, I noted motorcycle officers coming off of their cycles and running up the embankment on Dealey Plaza. At the same time, Chief Curry was on his intercom radio giving instructions to the motorcycle escorts to move out, Code 3 to Parkland Hospital. We moved out immediately, at which time I took the microphone and requested the DPD dispatcher, 521 to advise my Station 5 radio room to notify all officers in my department to immediately get over to the area where the shooting occurred and saturate the area of the park, railroad, and all buildings. Also advising all deputies to return to the station and stand by for emergency assignment. All right, so let me analyze this, as my expertise had been in, obviously, law enforcement and crime scene processing and whatnot. Let's say you have if I was working in my city that I was a cop in, and they said, "Hey, we just had an assassination, and it's in this area." I'm trying to think of an area that's similar to like a Dealey Plaza. We had a big old park area with a big grassy area, and so what would we do? You would have 3 or 4 cars get to the scene, get initial statements, and you would have to figure out an area to lock down, period. You really wouldn't have 100 cops show up and trample the fucking crime scene to death. You couldn't possibly do that. So they would send, well, number one, the fucking chief of police would show up. That's a fact. All the command staff would show up, but they're smart and they're lazy. So they would know to stay far enough away to not interfere with anything. You would have they would assign very senior officers to this, to get to the scene first, evaluate, and they would set up a perimeter. They would have to have cops in cars sitting at intersections, blocking it off, because that that's a psychological barrier. It doesn't stop anybody from crossing it. Perimeters are better at night, because you can see people breaking your perimeter easier. But you would have, you'd need 6 to 8 cars in the perimeter around an area that size. Nobody would be allowed to exit that perimeter. Everybody would be fucking detained. Did any of that happen here? No, not at all. He's just sending everybody to the area to go and look in the railroad yard and all this stuff. This is not how you would do it. And it just goes to show how, like, training and understanding of law enforcement techniques over the last 50 years between when this happened and when I became a cop is it's unfucking believable. Really, it's crazy. All right, let me continue. This was being done as we were proceeding Code 3 to the Stemmons Freeway and was approximately half to 2 minutes out from the time the shooting occurred. We arrived within minutes at the emergency entrance to Parkland Hospital, where I got out of the car and stood at the side of the presidential automobile while the president was removed from the automobile and placed on a stretcher and taken into the emergency room. Okay, so let me just comment on something else. Decker, this is not a very specific report. This is very generalized, and it's generalized for a reason, obviously. He didn't go into the specifics on how initially Curry, moved the car over to the left and allowed the president to shoot by, right? The president shoots by, the president's car, or the the president's car shoots by, and then when you look at the follow-up photos, you'll see that the lead car had at some point, made its way in front of the president's limousine yet again. So you have a game of leapfrog going on there, right? Specifically, and I've already discussed this in all my work before and in my book, this was done to allow the president's limousine and the Secret Service car to slow down enough for Jack Valenti to exit the president's limousine and run to the other side of the Secret Service car where he's picked up and driven to Parkland Hospital, and where he drops the rifle in the back seat, or maybe middle seat, who knows, of the Secret Service car, and then he's captured in McIntyre photo number 2 on the way to Parkland Hospital. Then he gets to Parkland Hospital, where he will plant the bullet, the magic bullet, pointed tip 303. For some reason, he also points a fully jacketed pointed tip 303, which was picked up by, God damn it, what the fuck is his name? I can't believe I can't remember this. This is part of my normal spiel. But anyway, a second bullet was also found, and that's never brought up anywhere. And, but yeah, then eventually that bullet will be swapped out by the FBI. And Jack Valenti will then be allegedly summoned from the basement of Parkland Hospital where he plants the magic bullet. He'll be summoned by Cliff Carter to go meet with Johnson. Johnson's already on his way to Air Force One, if he's not already at Air Force One. According to Valenti, he talked and saw Johnson at the hospital. I don't believe that's possible because the timing that Johnson would have gotten to the hospital, and you don't see Valenti in any of the pictures of Johnson leaving the hospital, going to get in the car to leave to go to Air Force One. You don't see him in any of those pictures. He's not there. He's clearly not there. He's clearly not with Johnson. He obviously doesn't get with Johnson until after he's already on Air Force One, at which time he becomes Johnson's gatekeeper. Everyone who was in that fucking airplane said that if you wanted to talk to Johnson, you had to go through Valenti. That's how it fucking was. That is how it was. So, none of that is mentioned by Decker here, right? None of it's mentioned by Decker. All right, let me continue. We moved out immediately, at which time I took the microphone and requested the DPD Dispatcher 521 to advise my Station 5 radio room to notify all officers in my department to immediately get over to the area where the shooting occurred and saturate the area of the park, railroad, and all buildings, also advising all deputies to return to the station and stand by for emergency assignment. This was being done as we were proceeding Code 3 out Stemmons Expressway, and was approximately 1.5 to 2 minutes from the time the shooting occurred. We arrived within minutes at the emergency entrance to Parkland Hospital, where I got out of the car and stood at the side of the presidential automobile while the president was removed from the automobile and placed on a stretcher carriage and taken into the emergency room. I waited until Governor Conley was also removed from the automobile, and both Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Conley had also entered the hospital, at which time I then went to an automobile belonging to the DPD Homicide Division and requested them to return to me at the scene of the shooting. I'd seen Mr. Forrest Sorrells also got into another automobile, which was also proceeding back towards the city, also proceeding Code 3. Upon my arrival at the Texas School Book Depository building, I observed many officers of my department present, and I contacted Alan Sweat, Chief Criminal Deputy at my department, and Inspector Sawyer of the Dallas Police Department, and they were getting witnesses together, and they also informed me that the building was secured. I was advised that Deputy Sheriff Luke Mooney had found empty cartridges on the 6th floor of the building and that he was standing by awaiting the arrival of the crime scene unit of the Dallas Police Department. Mr. Jimmy Kitching, Chief of Identification Bureau of my department, had also arrived at the scene. However, I ordered him back to the Sheriff's Department and advised that the crime search unit was en route and we would hold secure any evidence pending their arrival. Within a few moments, the crime search unit had arrived and were permitted to enter the building. At this time, I'm just pausing here because I'm trying to figure out which crime search unit he's talking about. Is he talking about Lieutenant Day, or is he talking about some other unit? Because remember, the sheriff's office will have its own crime scene unit, and the Dallas Police Department will have its own crime scene unit, right? So which one is he talking about? At this time, I was notified that another of my deputies, Eugene Boone, had found the rifle on the 6th floor of the building, and I also advised him to stand by the evidence until the crime search unit was ready to take over. I then sent Chief Criminal Deputy Alan Sweat back to the sheriff's office to see that statements were taken from witnesses who had been sent to the office earlier by both Deputy Sweat and Inspector Sawyer. At approximately 1:30 p.m., I received word on Inspector Sawyer's car radio that a Dallas police officer had been shot on Jefferson Street in Oak Cliff and that the suspect was supposedly at large in the area on foot. All right, so this is where we have a fucking problem here, okay? Because I know what the official story is as 116, right? So we have, even if the fucking shooting was at 116, which it wasn't, it was at 106. Why would it take him 15 minutes to hear about that, right? Well, we know it's not at 116 because we have the witnesses on scene who used Tippett's own radio to call in that there had been a shooting, and that happened at 1:10 p.m. Okay, so it happened at 106, not 116. But here he's claiming not to hear about it till 1:30, which doesn't make sense to me. I immediately got a hold of officers who were present, including deputy sheriffs, Dallas Police Department officers, and FBI officers who were at the scene, advising them of the shooting and dispatched them to Oak Cliff to assist in the search. At this time, Officer Sweat also reported to me that he had already sent 4 detectives to Oak Cliff to assist in the search for the suspect who had killed the police officer. After my first arrival at the Texas School Book Depository building from Parkland Hospital, Captain Fritz of the DPD Homicide Division arrived, and he went up into the Texas School Book Depository building, leaving a pair of his own officers downstairs where they opened up their automobile and brought out rifles to assist them in securing the building. Shortly thereafter, Captain Fritz came to my office where he contacted his department by telephone and advised me that the suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, had been apprehended in the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff. He also advised me that Oswald had been employed in the Texas School Book Depository. After arriving at my office, Alan Sweat advised me that when the first of the witnesses had been brought to my office, that he had opened the polygraph room to be used for the interrogation of witnesses, and that Deputy Sheriff Mrs. Rosemary Allen and Mr. Wallace Heitman, FBI agent, were interviewing and taking statements from the witnesses who seemed to have the most valuable information. Upon the arrival at my office of Mr. Forrest Sorrells, I had Chief Deputy Alan Sweat take Mr. Sorrells to this room where Mr. Wallace Heitman and Mrs. Rosemary Allen were interviewing witnesses and taking statements. Jim, let's see if we can't find any statements from Mr. Wallace Heitman, Heitman, and Mrs. Rosemary Allen, Allen, please. After the capture of Oswald in the Texas Theater, Deputy Sheriff E.R. Walters contacted me, and I ordered him and deputies Harry Weatherford and J.L. Oxford to go to a house located at 2515 West 5th Street in Irving, Texas, to meet detectives there, Rose and Atomic of the DPD Homicide Division, which they did. After gaining permission from Mrs. Ruth Payne and Mrs. Marina Oswald at this location, these officers searched the premises. Mrs. Payne gave Deputy Walters a telephone number where she said that Lee Oswald had been staying at. However, she said she did not know the address. Officer Walters then called me by public service giving me this information, whereupon I had Alan Sweat, Chief Deputy, Criminal Deputy, and Deputy Clint Lewis attempt to locate this address both by crisscross and by verifying same through telephone company. Sweat reported to me that this address to the telephone number was 1026 North Beckley. Okay, so let me pause right here because this is another area that I really never talk about Ruth Payne too much, but here's a perfect example. She gave the telephone number to 1026 North Beckley. So, but Oswald never stayed there, period. Kerry Thornley stayed there, and that means that Mrs. Payne, the fucking lying cunt, knew that Oswald never stayed there. She covered for Marina running with Kerry Thornley all through Alice, Texas on days that Oswald allegedly stayed there, but Marina did not. Give me a fucking break. What a lying piece of shit this woman is. Kerry Thornley was staying at 1026 North Beckley. Kerry Thornley shot Tippett. Kerry Thornley then flees to the Texas Theater where both he and Oswald are arrested, one in the balcony, and obviously Kerry Thornley in the balcony and Oswald down below. It's clear as day that that's how this went. So the idea that she would give a phone number to a place that Oswald never stayed just shows how much of in on the setup she is. At this time, I requested that David Johnston, Justice of the Peace, to issue a search warrant for the premises at this address, which he did, and he personally delivered the search warrant to that location for officers to search the premises. Information was obtained at this address from the landlady to the effect that a man by the name of O.H. Lee had been living at this location for a period of 2 weeks. All copies of statements were turned over to me for correlation and dissemination, and I saw that copies of all statements were given to the Secret Service, the FBI, and the Dallas Police Department. I have maintained the originals of all in my possession. Officers of my department then started turning in supplemental reports to me as their activities during and after the assassination. The 14 uniformed officers that had been assigned as security at Market Hall were ordered returned to the station. I remained in my office until approximately 9:30 p.m. on Friday, November 22nd, remaining in contact with my office via telephone from my home. I returned to my office Saturday morning at 6:30 a.m. All during the day, Saturday, November 23rd, I remained in contact with the Dallas Police Department in the event they should have decided to move the prisoner to the county jail. Extra security provisions were made and special quarters prepared to receive the prisoner when the transfer would be made. The taking of statements from the witnesses was continued on Saturday at approximately 3:30 p.m. Saturday afternoon. I was advised from City Hall that the transfer of Oswald might take place. At this time, it was noticeable that several hundreds of spectators were forming around the entrance to the county jail, and at this time, I notified the city of this action. I then ordered special officers to the area and began roping off the area to keep spectators away from the drive-in entrance to the county jail. Late in the afternoon, after hearing several times that Oswald was ready to be transferred, the press and other news media, cameras, TV, etc. began converging on the sheriff's office and county jail area, trying to make plans for the use of electrical equipment, cameras, etc. I remained in my office until approximately 8 p.m. when Jimmy Keir, WBAP, Channel 5, notified me that it was on TV that Oswald would be transferred to the county jail at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, November 24th. I later confirmed this with City Hall. I remained in my office Saturday night until approximately 9:30 p.m., at which time I ordered Alan Sweat, Chief of Criminal Deputy, and other detectives who were on this special assignment, and Mrs. Rosemary Allen, who had all been standing by in the event they were needed, to go to their homes. I arrived in my office early Sunday morning to recheck all security measures that had been provided for the transfer of Oswald. For additional security, I had placed all members of the press in a small room adjoining my private office and had the doors to this room secure so that none of the press could get to the prisoner as he was being brought into the jail. I, together with special members of my department, were outside the drive-in entrance to the county jail, awaiting the arrival of Oswald, when we received a flash on live TV, which was on in my office, that the shots had been fired in the basement of City Hall, and that a riot was in progress. At this time, the press who had been secured in this room adjoining my office made effort to get out. I ordered the doors released, and press proceeded to get to City Hall at great speed. I later learned that it was Oswald who had been shot in City Hall and that Jack Ruby had been taken into custody for the shooting. I was later notified that Oswald had died in the emergency room at Parkland Hospital. That's the end of Mr. Decker's statement. From here, we'll move on to a couple pages of administrative stuff. Lists a bunch of names, people involved in the investigation on November 22nd. Alan Sweat, Eugene Boone, and you got Mooney, A.D. McCurley, E.R. Walters, Buddy Walters, Harry Weatherford, Oxford, Faulkner, Lummy Lewis, C.L. Lummy Lewis. Anybody interested in some fascinating stuff? Look up Lummy's notes, C.L. Lewis. Look up his personal notes from November 22nd. Fascinating stuff. A bunch of people on there completely overlooked by the vast majority of Kennedy researchers. One Louis Shug, S-C-H-U-G. No one in the fucking world can find this fucking guy or ever even thought to look for him, but he's on there. Let me continue. C.J. Jones, Harold Elkins, John Wiseman, C.C. McCoy, W.W. Mabra, Clint Lewis, Charles Polk Player, Elsie Smith, Jack Watson, Roger Craig, Cecil Gentry, Ralph Waters, Billy Corson, Frank Vrila, VRLA, Charles Turner, James Ramsey, Sam Webster, Billy Joe Victory, never heard that name, Hiram Ingram, and W.C. Owens. Secretaries Turner, Allen, Cox Davis, and Milady. Uniformed patrolmen who were assigned special duty at Market Hall. All right, then we move into a bunch of statements that were collected by the Sheriff's Department. If I'm not mistaken, this should be all Sheriff's Department stuff, not Dallas Police Department stuff. So let's start. We will go through a couple of these, and then we'll wrap it up for today and pick this up on Monday, because it is Saturday after all. A voluntary statement from November 22nd, 63, from Hugh William Betzner, Jr., 5922 Velasco, Dallas, age 22, TA 7961. I was standing on Houston Street near the intersection of Elm Street. I took a picture of President Kennedy's car as it passed along Houston Street. I have an old camera. I looked down real quick and rolled the film to take the next picture. I then ran down to the corner of Elm and Houston Streets, and this being the southwest corner, I just took another picture as President Kennedy's car rounded the corner. He was just about all the way around the corner. I was standing back from the corner and had to take the pictures through some of the crowd. I ran on down Elm a little more, and President Kennedy's car was starting to go down the hill to the triple underpass. I was running, trying to keep the president's car in my view, and was winding my film as I ran. I was looking down at my camera to see the number of film as I ran. I took another picture as the president's car was going down the hill on Elm Street. I started to wind my film again. I heard a loud noise. I thought this noise was either a firecracker on a car or a car had backfired. I looked up and it seemed like there was another loud noise in the matter of a few seconds. I looked down the street and I could see the president's car and another one, and they looked like cars were stopped. Great statement here. I looked down the street and I could see the president's car and another one, and they looked like the cars were stopped. So a lot of people think the cars stopped in order for the shooter to be able to make the shot. I think that's complete bullshit. I believe the car stopped, slowed, took their time getting the triple underpass, because after the shot had occurred and Kennedy was already fucking dead, Valenti needed to make it over the top of the knoll to the other side, where he would then be picked up by the president's limousine by William Greer. Okay, so Greer didn't turn around and shoot anybody. It's the dumbest propaganda ever, because it detracts from the fact that William Greer picked up Valenti on the other side of the knoll. And here's a witness, a perfect witness, Mr. Betzner, who testified to the fact that they were stopped. This is the first time I've ever seen testimony that indicated they were stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Let me continue. Then I saw a flash of pink, like someone standing up and then sitting back down in the car. Then I ran around so I could look over the back of a monument, and I either saw the following. Then, or when I was standing back down the corner on Elm Street, I cannot remember exactly where I was when I saw the following. I heard at least 2 shots fired, and I saw what looked like a firecracker going off in the president's car. My assumption for this was because I saw fragments going up in the air. I also saw a man in either the president's car or the car behind his, and someone down in one of those cars pulled out what looked like a rifle. Yes, he's talking about in the Secret Service car. That's not controversial at all. Nothing special there. I also remember seeing what looked like a nickel revolver in someone's hand in the president's car or somewhere immediately around his car. That's interesting. This is probably used by the driver did it fucking assholes to give credence to their claim that Greer shot the president, but he didn't. It's ridiculous. Then the president's car sped up on the underpass, or under the underpass. Police and a lot of spectators started running up the hill on the opposite side of the street from me to a fence of wood. I assumed that was where the shot was fired from at the time. I kept watching the crowd. Then I came around the monument over to Main Street. I walked down toward where the president's car had stopped. I saw a police officer and some men in plain clothes. I don't know who they were. These police officers and the men in plain clothes were digging around in the dirt as if they were looking around for a bullet. I walked back around to the monument over to Elm Street where they were digging in the dirt. I went on across the street and up the embankment to where the fence is located. By this time, all of the people had left. There were quite a few people down on the street, crowded around the motorcycle. I was looking around the fence as the rumor had spread that was where the shot had been fired. The shot had come from. I started figuring where I was when I had taken the third picture, and it seemed to me that the fence row would have been in the picture. I saw a group of men who looked like they might be officers, and one of them turned out to be the Deputy Sheriff Boone. I told him about the picture I had taken. Deputy Sheriff Boone contacted superiors and was told to bring me over to the sheriff's office. Deputy Boone took my camera and asked me to wait. I waited in the sheriff's office, and sometime later, an hour or two later, he brought my camera back and told me as soon as they got through with the film and they were dry that they would give me the film. A little later, he came in and gave me the negatives and told me that they were interested in a couple of pictures and implied that the negatives was all I was going to get back. To the best of my knowledge, this is all I know about this incident. So let me comment real quick on this, on Betzner really fast. So on this, where he says he thought he saw a revolver. It looked like someone pulled out a rifle. Yep, that's George Hickey pulling out the AR-15, right? I also remember seeing what looked like a nickel revolver in someone's hand in the president's car or somewhere immediately around his car. I would think that that's the uniformed Dallas police officer who pulled out his revolver on the lawn area, which would be right across from where Betzner was, right? Confirmed revolver in Dealey Plaza on a cop, pulls it out right as like the Montesano film goes by, or one of those films. So, yeah, Nothing controversial there at all. Interesting stuff from Betzner. Oh, okay, this will be an interesting one. Now we got a statement from Jim Braden, otherwise known as Eugene Hale Brading, courier from Meyer Lansky. Before me, the undersigned authority on this, the 22nd day of November, 1963, appeared Jim Braden from Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, California. All right. He says, I am here on business, oil business, and was walking down Elm Street trying to get a cab, and there wasn't any. I heard people saying, my God, the president's been shot. Police cars were passing me, coming down toward the triple underpass, and I walked up among many other people, and this building was surrounded by police officers with guns, and we were all watching them. I moved on up to the buildings across the street from the building that was surrounded, and I asked one of the girls if there was a telephone that I could use, and she said, yes, there is one on the third floor of the building where I work. I walked through a passage to the elevator they were all getting on, the freight elevator, and I got off on the third floor with all the other people, and there was a lady using the pay telephone, and I asked her if I could use it when she hung up, and she said it was out of order, and I tried to use it, but with no success. I asked her how I can get out of this building, and she said that there is an exit right there, and then she said, wait a minute, there's an elevator now. I got on the elevator and returned to the ground floor, and the colored man who ran the elevator said, you're a stranger in this building. And I said, I was not supposed to let you up there, and he ran outside to an officer and said to the officer, he just taken me up and down in the elevator, and the officer said for me to identify myself, and I presented him with a credit card, and he said, well, we'll have to check out everything, and it took me to a superior and said for me to wait, and we'll check it out, and I was taken to the sheriff's office and interrogated. And that's it. That's his statement from Jim Braden, courier from Meyer Lansky. Close associate of Jimmy Fratiano, Los Angeles mobster, which means that he's equally as connected to the Mickey Cohen group with Al Gruber and all the Jews, right? He was close associate of Johnny Roselli, too, who was in with all those fucks. All right, next statement. Howard Leslie Brennan, age 44, presently employed by Wallace and Beard Construction Company as a steam fitter. Have been so employed for about the past 7 weeks. I am working in the Katy Railroad Yards at the west end of Pacific Street near railroad tracks. We had knocked off for lunch, and I had dinner at the cafeteria at Record and Main Street and had come back to see the President of the United States. I was sitting on a ledger wall near the intersection of Houston and Elm, near the red light pole. I was facing in a northerly direction, looking not only at Elm Street, but I could see the large red brick building across the street from where I was sitting. I take this building across the street to be about 7 stories anyway. In the east end of the building, and the second row of windows from the top, I saw a man in this window. I'd seen him before the president's car arrived. He was just sitting up there looking down, apparently waiting for the same thing. I was to see the president. I did not notice anything unusual about this man. He is a white man in his early 30s, slender, nice looking, and would weigh about 165 to 175 pounds, yet on a light color clothing, definitely not a suit. I proceeded to watch the president's car as it turned left at the corner where I was, about 50 yards from the intersection of Elm and Houston, to a point where I would say the president's back was in line with the last window. I have previously described, I heard what I thought was backfire. It run in my mind that it might be someone throwing firecrackers out the window of the red brick building, and I looked up at the building, and I saw this man I've described in the window. He was taking aim with a high-powered rifle. I could see all the barrel of the gun. I do not know if it had a scope on it or not. I was looking at the man in this window at the time of the last explosion. This man let the gun down to his side and stepped down out of sight. He then did not seem to be in any hurry. I could see from about the belt up. There was nothing unusual about him in all his appearance. I believe I could identify this man if I ever saw him again. Yeah, so in his early 30s, slender, nice-looking, slender, and would weigh about 65 to 175. Yeah, he's talking about Lauren Hall. He saw Lauren Hall in the window, not Oswald. All right, next statement. John Arthur Chisholm of Oak Cliff, age 23. I'm married, I have 3 children. I was standing with my wife and a 3-year-old boy. We were directly in front of the Stemmons Freeway sign as the motorcade rounded the corner from Houston onto Elm. When I saw the motorcade round the corner, the president was just standing and waving to the crowd, and just as he got in front of me, he turned and waved at the crowd on this side of the street. The right side, at this point, I heard what sounded like one shot, and I saw him, the president, sit back in his seat and lean his head to his left side. At this point, I saw Mrs. Kennedy stand up and pull his head over in her lap and then lay down over him as if to shield him. And the two men in the front seat, I don't know who they were. I looked back, and just about the time they looked back, the second shot was fired. At this point, I looked behind me to see whether it was fireworks display or something, and then I saw a lot of people running over for cover behind the embankment there just up on the grass. At this point, I turned back around and saw the motorcade beginning to speed up, and everybody was laying down but the driver. Of course, I didn't notice where it went. My wife and I began seeking cover, and we went to our car. Then we told a policeman about what we knew. All right, next one is from his wife, Marvin Faye Chisholm. I was with my husband and 3-year-old child who were standing at the corner where the sign says Stemmons Freeway to the right. As the president was coming through, I heard this first shot, and the president fell to his left. The president's wife immediately stood over him, and she pulled him up and lay him down in the seat, and she stood up over him in the car. The president was standing and waving and smiling at the people when the shot happened. And then there was a second shot that I heard after the president's wife had pulled him down in the seat. It came from what I thought was behind us, and I looked, but I couldn't see anything. The two men in the front of the car stood up, and then when the second shot was fired, they all fell down the car and took off just like that after the motorcade went by. After that, I jumped up and headed for my car. We were parked up on the freeway. A police patrolman came up where we were and told him what we saw. President fell to his left. That's a bunch of people say that. Next one from Bob Edwards. Age 22, from Irving, Texas. Today, November 22nd, 1963, I was with Ronald Fisher, and we were on the corner at Elm and Houston. I happened to look up there at the building, the Texas School Book Depository building, and I saw a man at the window of the 5th floor. The window was wide open all the way. There was a stack of boxes around him I could see. Bob remarked that he must be hiding from somebody. I noticed that he had on a sport shirt. It was light colored. It was yellow or white, something to that effect. His hair was rather short. I thought it might be something around 26, as near as I could tell. The motorcade rounded the corner about this time, and then I thought I heard 4 shots, but it never occurred to us what it was. The shots seemed to come from that building there. And that's from Bob Edwards. All right. Next one. This will probably be the last one. We'll wrap it up for today, and we'll have more on Monday. This one from Amos Lee Eunice. That's the young black kid who was detained shortly. So I'm presently going to school at Franklin D. Roosevelt High School. I'm in the 9th grade. I got out of school this morning to see the President of the United States when he came to Dallas. I was standing on the corner of Elm and Houston Street. From where I was standing, I could look across the street and see a large red brick building. I saw the president turn the corner in front of me, and I waved at him, and he waved back. I watched the car on down the street, and about the time the car got near the black and white sign, I heard the shot. Started looking around, and I looked up at the red brick building. I saw a man in a window with a gun. I saw him shoot twice. He then stepped back behind some boxes. I could tell the gun was a rifle. It sounded like an automatic rifle, the way it was shooting. I just saw a little bit of the barrel and some of the trigger housing. This was a white man. He did not have a hat on. I just saw this man for a few seconds. As far as I know, I'd never seen this man before. So Amos Eunice is standing north by the sign. And so look back at the book depository. He's not seeing the position of the sniper's nest. He's seeing the person on the opposite side of the sniper's nest on the 6th floor, which is Lauren Hall. Okay. Say he didn't have a hat on, which is probably true because when he was up there in the building, at one point he has the sport shirt and then he has a sport coat and he's got the hat, but he probably took them off to do the shooting, threw them back on when he left from the shooting, as he flees and is seen by Richard Randolph Carr. And, all right, I'll do one more. One more, and then we're done. This one's from Ronald B. Fisher, Mesquite, Texas. employed at the Dallas County Auditor's Office. Today, November 22nd, 63, I was with Bob Edwards. We were standing on the corner of Elm and Houston on the southwest corner, about 30 seconds before the motorcade came by. Bob turned to me and said that there was a man on the 5th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building at the window here. And I looked up and saw a man. I looked up at the window and noticed that he seemed to be laying down there, or in a funny position anyway, because all I could see was his head. I noticed that he was lightheaded and that he had an open neck shirt, and that was before the motorcade rounded the corner. I noticed his complexion seemed to be clear and that he was in his 20s, appeared to be in his 20s. I turned away, and by that time, the motorcade rounded the corner, and then I heard what I thought was 3 shots, and the motorcade was about where that Stebbins Freeway sign is there. I do remember one thing that happened at the time I saw the man up there. There was a girl walked in the Texas School Book Depository building, a rather tall girl, and looked to me like she might be an employee in that building. She was walking in while everybody else had been coming out. That's interesting. Probably Sarah Stanton. Sarah Stanton had to get back in, and as soon as the shooting happened, she went back inside the fucking building. So probably Sarah Stanton. But we'll get to her statement eventually here. We're going to cover statements for the next couple weeks. But all right. That's going to bring us to Larry Florer's statement, which we will get to tomorrow. Larry Florer, who many believe is actually Ted Shackley. So there's some contradicting information about Larry Florer, because Larry Florer is allegedly arrested out of the Daltex building, but Larry Florer himself, the real Larry Florer, later in interviews said he was arrested out of the county records building. So, which is it? But all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We might have an episode later of Bloody History World War II. May not. Who knows? Not sure. What day is today? It's Saturday, September the 21st. So, all right, guys, I'm out of here. We'll see you later.